Diviti Adonai Leneg Di Tamid. I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side, I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice. My being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful one see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. That's from Psalm 16.
Adonai, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? The psalmist taught us that we are like a breath. Our days are like a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning shoots up, renewed, and in the evening fades and withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, return, you mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we would understand whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. So mark the wholehearted and behold the upright. They shall have peace. Adonai, you redeem the souls of your servants, and none who trust in you shall be desolate. From Psalms 144 and 90.
Death has taken our beloved Shannon. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation. In their tears, there is loneliness. Lost in our sorrow, may we find the presence of loving friends. Hear us, O God, be with us. For Shannon's love that united us in life and which death will never be able to sever. For his companionship that all of us to some degree shared along the paths of life, and which will continue now through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of his heart and his mind that brought us joy and happiness, and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give thanks to God. In this time of grief, we can listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures, voices that bring us the ever new message that God is near. These passages tell of our kinship with our Creator, in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. And you have before you a translation of the 23rd Psalm. And if you'll join with me, those of you who would like, with God as my shepherd, I shall not want. The Eternal makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside the still waters, restores my soul, guides me in straight paths for the sake of God's name. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You've anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Eternal forever.
So as we hear different psalm texts and poetry and then personal comments, we also hear another voice from our tradition named in Hebrew Kohelet, named also known as Ecclesiastes, kind of one of the famous memorial service texts, to recognize that everything that exists that we think we have a hold on and understand has its exact opposite, and that is the fate of our lives. And as we meditate upon that, we try to find wisdom as to where we fall in between those poles of existence and experience. So Kohelet wrote, L'chol zman et l'chol chafetz tachat hashamayim, that for everything there is a season, for every experience under heaven, that there is a time to be born, there's a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot that which is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up. Yes, there is a time to weep, but also a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance. Yes, there's a time to throw stones, but there's a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow. Yes, there is a time to keep silence, and there's also a time to speak.
Friends, we are assembled here together in the darkness that has fallen upon us. We raise our voices together to the source of life, asking for comfort and strength during this period of time. We need light when gloom darkens our lives. We need fortitude and courage when pain and loss assail us. May we find these in God, who preserves from destruction all that is good. Let us find them too in loved ones and companions who do God's work by binding up the wounds of the stricken. Who among us has not passed through trials and bereavements? Some of us here bear fresh wounds in our hearts, and therefore we can feel more keenly the kinship of sorrow. Others, whose days of mourning are a bit further remote, still recall the comfort that sympathy brought to their sorrowing hearts. May our sharing of sorrow and our deeds of solace bring comfort to the loved ones of our dear Shannon.
It's an honor for me this morning to be here, to be with the family, but also to be with my colleague and friend and mentor, Rabbi Gene Levy, who was the former rabbi at Congregation Bethel in Tyler. That's where I am. I'm Neil Katz. I've been there for a number of years, and Rabbi Levy was there from the mid-'70s to the mid-'80s. And so he has kind of a long history and relationship with the family, and he'll talk about that. And I'm a Johnny-come-lately. I've only been here 20-some years, but I've known the family as well. But I thought, as a way to move into what's called the hesped, the eulogies, the personal memories and reflections, I wanted to bring in a third Congregation Bethel rabbi, not well known to many of you, but it was Rabbi Stephen Weisberg. And I share Rabbi Weisberg because he wrote something beautiful that kind of gets us in the moment. He said, and Rabbi Weisberg, unfortunately, was only there for 1 year, but he said, "Let us be honest with ourselves about death, for that honesty will enable us to understand better and ourselves more deeply. Death cannot deprive us of happy memories or enduring friendship or the eternal qualities of a beloved personality. Ironically, he said, death enhances memory, and it makes it even more vivid, all that was meaningful and lasting. Death cannot erase a life," he wrote, "and the love that ennobled it. True, we shall not see Shannon again, nor hear his voice. That is, we shall not see with our eyes, nor hear as we heard before, but with our hearts we shall see, and in the holy of holies of our minds we shall hear again comforting words that even death cannot silence. As he did so often in his life, so now, even in death, Shannon's memory will return to us again and again to heal the hurt of separation, to relieve the pain that death has wrought." And so at this moment, I'd like to I'll introduce each one, different people to come share personal memories and thoughts of Shannon. I'd like to begin with his daughter, Shay. If you'd like to come up.
The night before my dad passed, something very miraculous happened to me. Something that's never happened before. I had a dream where my mom told me that my dad wouldn't make it. She came to my room accompanied with him, and she told me, "You have to say goodbye." I got to hug my dad one last time. I'd like to think that was his soul visiting me. The night of my dad's passing, I went up to work, which sounds weird, but they comfort me because they're like my second family. My boss told me the few times that he did get to talk to my dad. that all he talked about was me, about how proud of me he was, how he was glad to find me something that made me happy. I found something that I was passionate about. He was glad he got to see a new side of me. I never knew this until that day. My dad was a man who loved to protect. He was quite literally crazy about us. He loved his family, and that was never something that could have been questioned. He was the one who kept me in check, the reason why I am so successful regarding school and work. I wanted to make him proud. And I did. And I'm going to continue to be successful thanks to him. He paved a way for me to be successful in life, and that will never stop. He may have loved me in a tough love kind of way, but he still loved me. I will never forget what he's done to me and for me, and I hope he watches me continue to make good grades and become a wonderful businesswoman. That's it.
Thank you, Shay. I'd like to invite up Jim Egner to share some memories as well.
Wow. A lot of folks here. Try to do this without bawling my eyes out here. I'm really not real sure what to say here. I'm not a storyteller. Shannon was. I'm more of a story listener. Where to start? I suppose I'll share some memories of my friend, my brother, James Shannon Ellsworth, and how we first met. He's also known as LZ. Military folks may know what that means. Ellsworth, kids call him that. The Wall, there's a story there. Big pain in the butt. That's some other nicknames that we really can't talk about here. I don't think I've ever heard anybody call him James. Has anybody ever called him James? I don't think so. Anyway, we first met at SFA. I was the technical support specialist for the human services department, and Bobby Leslie was our administrative assistant at the time, and she was looking for a new student worker for me. This was around, I don't know, 2005, 2006 timeframe. I'm standing on a ladder in a classroom pulling microphone cable wires through the ceiling, and in struts this big tall character wearing this really loud print shirt, kind of like a Hawaiian shirt. Get a picture there. Big goofy grin on his face and that I know something you don't know look in his eye. Yeah, you know that look. Anyway, I was supposed to be interviewing this guy, and I'm thinking, who is this dude? He started talking to me, and before I knew it, about 15 minutes had passed, and the first F-bomb was dropped. And I think he was okay with me at that point. You guessed it. He was interviewing me. As it turns out, Bobby had already hired him. He was only a part-time student worker, but I shared my office with him and worked hard. He was a hard worker. Took more initiative than anybody else ever worked for me and put in way more hours than was required, many times just to hang out with me and talk and talk. We took lunches together, hauled computers around together, and all the while getting to know each other. And it didn't take very long. He talked, and I listened. Hunting, fishing, gardening, the Marines, how to build stuff, how to fix cars, alternate energy, World War II, world religions, grilling, cooking, and making chili, politics, relationships, beer, guns, family history, PTSD, the moon landing, and something I can't really go into right now, but you name it, he talked about it. And something he talked about a lot, said this a lot, who your family is. Not so much what family you were born into, but who you chose to call family. More on that later. Let's see. One day, Dr. Frank Brister, then head of the speech pathology program, a Korean War veteran and U.S. Marine as well, saw him walking down the hall. Brister looked up at him and said, "The Wall." And that nickname stuck. For the next 4 years we worked together. That's what we called it. The Wall. Somewhere there's a video that Clint Hanna, a SFA film student, made at the time, and he did an interview with The Wall called A Conversation with the Wall. Okay. We made a movie. It was about vampires, and he was in it. So that's another story. During this time, Randy Watson, who was in another department at SFA called OIT, previously, Randy and I had worked together, and I knew he was looking for a hunting lease, an affordable hunting lease. And Shannon's obsession with hunting grew as the seasons approached, and it was suggested that he and I get on a lease, but we need a couple more guys to make it affordable. Turned out that Bobby, again, the admin assistant, had a cousin with a hunting lease in Reclaw that was still available. He and Randy quickly ran out, took a look at the property, and I guess the rest is history. I'll leave the deer camp hunting stories up to Randy to tell. To make a long story short, Patrick Lewis and Jared Vaughter quickly came on board as part of this deer lease hunting group. It's funny, Patrick, we met at Human Services as well. He was still in the Marine Corps at the time and was dating the receptionist in the department. When Shannon met him, Patrick, they instantly struck up a conversation. It was a bunch of Marine Corps jargon. I didn't understand a word. And Jared, he was a geology classmate. I think we talked about that before. And the first time we met, we were talking about homemade guns. So anyway, Shannon called us the boys. I suppose that's my little history lesson on us. I wanted to share that, how we met, how we became friends, brothers. He considered the boys as part of his family, and that I am deeply honored. I won't bore you with the stories, but to say this, every time the boys got together, there was always something to talk about. From burning dirt and the best pot of chili ever made, to the raid on Little Mexico, as it became known, to the premature discharge shotgun incident that almost cost Jared the car door, to the camper fire that resulted in a volunteer fire department having to be called out. Oh, and that cold night in the drafty cabin with the fireplace that couldn't put out any heat, nearly froze to death. And the incident with the preacher's house. Those of you who know those stories, you know the story. I could drone on. To the very last time we got together. The mysterious hunting blind that showed up that required a visit by the sheriff. It was never a dull outing. Usually mayhem ensued, and we would have to improvise, adapt, and overcome. Shannon said that a lot. I remember how his stash of Keystone Lights were once used as an unsuccessful fire suppressant. How the Keystone was once used as an improvised laundry detergent. And how the empty Keystone cans are used to mark the paths and trails in the woods. These stories, those treasured memories, are what I wanted to share today. I wish I could tell them as good as he could. I miss you, my friend, my brother.
Thank you, Jim. I'd like to ask Randy Watson to come up, share some thoughts as well. You were sort of introed already by Jim.
Morning. And just kind of follow up on a couple of things that came to mind when you were going through the list of incidents at the deer camp. Finding a coffin in the woods was another one that we can add to that. But the fire, yeah, by far was sort of a routine thing at first until everybody's eyes got real big when we realized the fire was going to grow and become quite large. So, but we somehow got out of that. But I do remember Jim, I remember the volunteer fire department, I think it was Rusk County or something, came out, and the guy had his little notepad. He said, "I have to fill out a report, guys." And I think we said something like 2 pieces of metal rubbed together and caused a spark or something that started the fire. And he pulls his glasses down and he said, "Is that what you want me to put down?" I said, "Yes, sir, if that's okay." So anyway, but good stories. Thank you, Jim, for that, sharing that with us. And my story is kind of similar. I kind of go over some of the other incidents, some of the things outside of the deer camp that happened with over the years with me and Shannon. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share a little bit with you this morning. Shannon really was one of those larger than life characters that you hear about, but you don't often run across. I'd first like to emphasize how much he cared about all the people that were closest to him. Of course, first came his immediate family, and he was a dedicated husband. He was a dedicated father. And for all of us who were closest to him, Shannon was always the first person to call you when you needed someone to talk to or a situation arose that required some expert advice. In fact, I think Shannon oftentimes cared about what was going on in the lives of those he cared about more than we actually did ourselves. Although we might not have always put his advice into practice, his counsel usually left us with at least some key points to consider, or at the very least, feel like we just received a good drill sergeant butt chewing. Yes, Shannon also served our country with honor and shared many of his military experiences with those who were closest to him. He spent combat time over in Somalia. He also spoke highly of several of his Marine Corps brothers. And for his sacrifice and service, we are forever grateful. And his son, Miles, is carrying on the tradition in service in the Air Force. We appreciate that, Miles. Over the past few days, I've been reflecting on many great times we had together over the years. And although I could stand here literally all day and keep you in stitches with all these stories, there was a trip that we went on back in 2012 that I'd like to share a moment or two with you now. Almost exactly 12 years ago, in early July, Shannon and I decided that we were going to load up our camping gear into my old Jeep and drive up into the Ouachita Mountains of southeastern Oklahoma for a short camping trip and to check out some bargain priced mountain land that was off grid, by the way, too, and was for sale. Anyway, we got up there, and while we were driving up a poorly maintained gravel road, I could tell that Shannon was getting a bit uneasy about the steep and rocky grade we were ascending. In fact, we were actually sliding a little bit, I think, if I recall. All of a sudden, he said, "Stop." And he promptly got out of the Jeep and shut the door. And then as he was standing a few feet away from the vehicle, and just as I had started to roll forward again, he yelled, "Stop," with a more forceful voice this time. Next, and with sincere Marine determination, he yanked open the back seat door, grabbed his 30-pack of Keystone Light, shut the door, and said, "Just in case you go over the cliff." I laughed just as I watched. I just laughed as I watched him walk up that hill with an open can in one hand and the rest of his 30-pack in the other. What an adventure we had, even spotting black bear tracks and watching fireworks go off down below from the mountaintop campground that we stayed in. And even though we were eaten up by chiggers, I mean literally eaten up all over, we scratched all the way home. in the 100+ degree heat while camping. We had a great time on that trip, and it will always be a special memory that I'll cherish. Another noteworthy trip that we went on was to Yellowstone National Park. Now, Shannon was a very meticulous planner, and we packed everything, including the kitchen sink, for our expedition. We even impressed other campers on how prepared we were, to include lighting the path to the public restrooms at night. We actually had them stopping and thanking us for this. Others that wanted the true wilderness experience weren't so grateful, I don't think, but that's a whole nother story. Anyway, while we were there, we rafted down the rapids of the Yellowstone River, saw the famous geyser Old Faithful, and feasted on Shannon's delicious meals every evening in the cool mountain air. Sounds pretty good this time of year, doesn't it? Yeah, that's another special memory. Unlike many of us guys, Shannon was also a master at multitasking. And when they lived just outside of Nacogdoches, I had called him one afternoon. And while we were carrying on a normal conversation, I heard a loud pow. And I said, "What's going on?" And he replied, "Hold on just a second." Then there were two more pops, pop, pop. He then got back on the phone and continued discussing what we were previously talking about without missing a beat. I interrupted him and said, "Wait, what was that sound?" He said, "Oh, our rooster just attacked Shay, his youngest daughter, and so I just shot it." Besides being a good multitasker, you see, Shannon was also a fierce protector of his family. He was so proud and complimented all of them regularly. Everyone who met Shannon came to realize really quickly just how much he loved his family. Now, who could forget the other important members of the family? Shannon loved his pets. The kitty, of course, but I think his dogs, Sandy and Tucker, were his favorites. Unfortunately, not too long ago, Sandy passed away, and I remember Shannon mentioning the last time we talked that he had been mourning over her death quite a bit. I have fond memories of pet sitting for them a few times when they went out of town. I recall how Sandy, being a lab, loved to fetch a ball. We played until her tongue would almost drag the ground. And I would always get a friendly text message or voicemail from Shannon reminding me to flush the front bathroom toilet so Sandy would have fresh water to drink. Shannon was not your average Joe. He did not allow himself much time for things like Facebook and other forms of social media. He preferred the personal touch and would much rather call someone as opposed to texting. Of course, face-to-face interaction was best, and that's really the best way you could get to know the real Shannon. His dear least buddies weren't friends. Patrick, Jared, Jim, myself, and Jim's son, and just a whole list of people that we had as guests over the years. They were known as his brothers. Every November, there was usually a huge event as we all gathered to eat Jim's famous deer camp chili. And you could tell both of us mentioned that, so that was a big hit out there. Sit around the campfire and tell tall tales, some which were true, and the other 99% fabricated or exaggerated. Unfortunately, I really can't think of too many that would be appropriate enough for me to share today in this forum with you all here this morning. Those were special times, I will say. We really did. We bonded out there, had a lot of good memories. And, I don't think Shannon could ever be replaced out there. It's going to be a little different. So in closing, Shannon was one of those friends who was truly a brother, and it still hasn't sunken in that I won't be able to call him to get that sage advice or just catch up on what's been going on anymore. There will be an empty chair sitting around the campfire this fall at our deer camp, but I know somehow we will all still feel his presence out there in those woods this November. Well done, brother. Salute. Rest in peace, and may Sherry, Shayna, Shay, Shirley, Miles, and the entire family be comforted during this difficult time. And thank you for the privilege of being able to speak on Shannon's behalf today. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Randy. I'd like to ask Sharia Johnson to come up.
Sorry. Shannon is my nephew, but really he was more like a little brother to me. Every time we talked, he called me sis. Growing up, he spent a lot of time at our house on school days after school and weekends when he would spend the night. My parents were his grandparents, and he adored them dearly, so much so that he started calling them mom and dad as well. When we were young, Shannon and I went to the same school. So my mom would pick us up from school and he would come home to our house and stay until my sister picked him up. Back then we carried book bags with us to school to carry our books in. And Shannon carried a little cream-colored canvas bag that had the Jolly Green Giant's friend, Little Sprout, on it. And on the top of the bag, it had a drawstring with a big green wooden ball on the end of it. One day after school, Shannon was annoying me and we were arguing. And I remember sitting on the couch and he was standing in front of me. For whatever reason, I decided I'd had enough. His little Sprout bag was sitting beside me empty. So I picked it up and I threw it at him. The bag hit him on the chest right here by his shoulder, but unfortunately, the drawstring with the big wooden ball kept going on over Shannon's shoulder, and all I heard was a loud thump as it hit Shannon's shoulder blade. The next thing I remember is Shannon's face turning the brightest color of red and his mouth opening wide with no sound coming out. In the split second it took before any sound did come out, my life flashed before my eyes because I knew I was going to be in big trouble. Finally, he started screaming and crying, understandably so, because I know it hurt, and I'm profusely apologizing. We never knew what happened to that bag, but over the years, Shannon and I would talk about that memory and laugh. A few years ago, Shannon and Sherry and the girls came to visit my family and I. Shannon walked up to me and handed me something and told me to open it. He had the biggest grin on his face as I opened it. I finally got it opened, and there was the same exact Little Sprout Jolly Green Giant bag like Shannon carried when he was little. I guess somehow Shannon had found this bag on eBay. We laughed about it and I hugged him, but he looked at me and he said, "You make sure you don't throw this at me." I still have that bag, and now it means more to me than anything. Shannon was a thoughtful person, and he fiercely loved his family and his friends. And every time we talked, he told me how proud he was of Shayna, Shay, and Miles. When Shannon was in the hospital, I would call every day and check on him. On July 2nd, I had a doctor appointment, so I told Sherry I would call her as soon as I got home. But on my way home, I just had this overwhelming feeling that Shannon was gone. I could not shake this feeling, so finally I said out loud in the car, I said, "Shannon, are you in heaven right now?" And in my mind, I heard Shannon's voice say, "Yep." I was a little freaked out, to say the least. I'm driving in my car thinking, what just happened? I thought my mind is playing tricks on me, and I made myself think that. So right before I got home, I thought, okay, I'm going to ask one more time. So I said, "Shannon, are you really in heaven right now?" And in my mind, the answer I heard was, "Yes. And mom and dad are right here. This place is amazing. You ought to see it." At this point, I'm really thinking, I've lost it. So I finally get home and I call Sherry, and she tells me that Shannon passed away. I told Sherry about what happened in the car, and we both agreed that that was Shannon's way of letting me know that he was okay. Shannon is okay, for he is healed, he is with loved ones, and he is in the presence of God. And one day we will see him again. I love you, brother.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Juan Paulette.
It's nice to see so many friends and family here to celebrate Shannon's life. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Juan, his brother-in-law, who Shannon lovingly referred to me as Uno. Growing up as an only child, I considered Shannon as the big brother I never had. I could always count on him for his advice when I needed it, and even when I didn't need it. Shannon didn't sugarcoat anything either. He told you how the cows eat the cabbage. We had a lot in common. We were both in the military. He was in the Marine Corps, and I was in the Army. And we both razzed each other on that. And he loved talking about his time in the Marine Corps. He loved talking about his brother. About his Marine brothers, who I never had the opportunity to meet. But through his stories, I felt that I knew all of them. We enjoyed similar pastimes, such as working on cars, grilling or smoking meat, and fixing things. And we'd often text each other pictures of our latest projects and comment on them. He loved to talk, and I was a good listener. You don't realize how much someone is a part of your life until they're not. I still find myself looking at my phone. Waiting for him to text me that ribeyes are on sale at Kroger's this week, or some random funny meme. I'm gonna miss getting together during the holidays. We'd always go to Shannon's house, and I'd help him deep fry the Thanksgiving turkey. I was the sous chef, and he'd always assign me a random task, like manning the fire extinguisher, or making sure the little timer on the burner didn't go out, so the flame didn't go out. And one day, I was manning the fire, and I let it go out, and he came back, and I never heard the end of it. He said, "Uno, you had one job." We sat around in the garage and talked about everything under the sun. Or should I say, he talked and I listened. We would always enjoy a favorite beverage. He, as you all heard, he enjoyed his Keystone Lights. And I always had a random IPA, which he referred to as I piss a lots. When we needed flight information, we could always count on Shannon to give us a detailed play-by-play of what the plane was doing. He lived near the airport, so he knew when our plane was flying over his house, he would get out and wave at us. Not that we could see him. When I was struggling to stay awake during long drives, I would call him. And he'd talk to me the whole way and keep me awake. I could go on about all the ways that Shannon was part of my life. And although he may not be here physically, he'll always be in my heart. In my thoughts. I love you, brother.
Thank you, Juan. I'd like to invite up Rabbi Gene Levy. Sharon.
To Sherry, Shayna, Shay, Miles, Shirley. A good friend, Rabbi Katz, and I are subjecting you to another service and a series of eulogies for your beloved Shannon. But after having heard the tape of last week's beautiful and touching service, I humbly ask that you forgive us for possibly repeating much of what you've already heard. I really did not know Shannon all that well. Therefore, I'll be relying on the sweet and tender memories shared by Shannon's friends in Humble and what you heard today. But I did want to acknowledge for those gathered here today that Sherry and Shirley and Wendy have been part of my wife Bobby's and my family for almost 50 years. Our lives have intertwined through the temple in Tyler, where Rabbi Katz is now the beloved rabbi, and through a continuing friendship that has taken us to Israel, to 3 or 4 bat mitzvahs, confirmation, weddings, and unfortunately funerals. The things that I did know about Shannon and that were magnified by his friends today and last week are that Shannon was so good at so many various tasks, from cooking to neighborhood patrol to fixing just about, was it everything? It became obvious to me that Shannon's Marine experiences were so crucial to defining who he was. His friends, as you just saw in the last 15, 20 minutes, his friends tear up when they speak of Shannon as more than a friend. And think in your mind, how many times did you hear the word brother? The stories of Shannon's wooing of his theater appreciation professor, Dr. Sherry Waterston, are legendary. One of Shannon's friends in Humble said that Shannon, no doubt, appreciated the professor more than the course. And I was pleased and honored to have officiated at their wedding in 2004. My wife, Bobby, reminded me that Sherry and Shannon were having so much fun at their wedding that they did not want to leave. Rabbi Katz's readings link Shannon to the Jewish tradition through Sherry and Shirley, and I will second those emotions. And so I say to Sherry and Shayna and Shay and Shirley and Miles, how do you get that Miles in with all the SHs? But to your many friends here with this morning, including a number who have come in from Tyler to honor Sherry and family, may we all keep Shannon's memory alive and in love by the actions we do, even as Bobby and I hope that our own relationship with the Waterston family will continue to be as close as ever. So may it be. Amen.
Thank you to everyone who spoke. Sometimes we learn about people in moments like these, unfortunate as it may be, more than we knew about them in the moments when Shannon and Sherry were members of our congregation, Bethel, before they moved to Houston area. So I had that similar experience of him sort of being a jack of all trades, knowing a little bit about everything and wanting to, for some reason, he got really involved and very interested in the physical structure of our building. He would complain about light bulbs or this particular molding that needed to be fixed and so forth. So always involved with hopefully helping out a little bit in his moments. And then he would call me randomly and just ask me random questions about religion or board policies or anything like that. But a sweet, sweet soul. And I thank everybody for their memories. I just want to close this block with a thought. In Judaism, we're taught that death is a part of the divine pattern of the universe. But it's more than just part of a pattern. We're actually taught that each death is a moment of awareness for each of us. We go about our daily lives free from the existential reality that all life will eventually end. But it's moments such as this one, when we confront the death of a beloved friend and family member. It's moments like this that our fantasy of immortality is punctuated with awareness. And it's in these moments that we're taught not to despair, rather we're taught to embrace and celebrate life even more. So we learn from Shannon's death that life is indeed precious. And we bring honor to his memory when we move forward from this day with a greater appreciation of our own lives. In this way, we become heirs to his good character and to his love. Zichrono livracha, may Shannon's good deeds live on in our good deeds, and may his memory be a blessing for us all. Amen.
With all the wonderful words that you've heard, let's take a moment of silent prayer, of remembrance of our own connections to Shannon through whatever phase of life it happens to be. We'll take a moment of silence, and then I'll ask those of you who wish to please rise for the final couple of prayers. And please rise now in body or spirit. Eomale rachamim shochein bam romim, amsei menucha nachonatan kanfei hashchina, im kedoshim utahorim kadohar harakia mazirim, et nishmat Shannon Ellsworth, shehalach laolamo, ba'al harachamim yastirehu b'seter kenafav laolamim, v'yisror b'torah chayim et nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, v'nomar amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Shannon Ellsworth, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen.
So we remain standing. And if you have the yellow sheet, we're going to be offering the words of the Kaddish in just a moment. And after that, I'm going to ask, I believe, are we doing taps? Taps?
I don't know.
Oh.
Steve, do we have the taps?
Was that? No.
I can't see him. I don't know if he has.
I wasn't sure if we were going to be doing the musical.
Okay.
Yes, there we are. So in a moment, when we offer the words of Kaddish, we'll remain standing. We'll hear the music of taps and honoring his military legacy. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, Yehi shem Adonai mevarach. God gives, God takes away. But we bless the name of God. We offer the words of Kaddish, which is the traditional prayer of remembrance. It speaks itself nothing of death. It speaks about God and God's sovereignty, but it is the text that we are familiar with, that Shannon heard many times when he came to services, where we offer words of memory and consolation. So if you know the text, feel free to say with me on that sheet. Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabbah. V'alma divarach Hirutei v'amlich malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael. V'agala v'zman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitalev v'yithalal Shemei d'Kudusha b'richu. Le'ela minko birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Amiran b'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba min Shmaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. V'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom imramav. Hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. V'imru. Amen. Zichronam levracha. May his memory be a blessing. So we hear the music of taps. Please be seated.
We're now coming to the conclusion of our service this morning. Go your way, for God has called you. Go your way, and may God be with you. May your righteousness go before you, and the glory of God receive you. Hamakom yilachem etchem. Now go forth in peace and into life. You're invited to stay for a reception provided by the family, provided by and the Lamplight Theater. And on behalf of Rabbi Katz and myself, we are so appreciative of your coming to remember Shannon and to be with the family. Amen.